Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now, this morning, we're on location in southern Alberta, Canada, at a location that's now known as Frank Slide. It used to be the location of a town called Frank, but on the 29th of April, 1903, around about 4 o'clock in the morning, over 80 million tons of rock slid down the mountainside there and just clipped part of the town. The sad thing is, that's where the miners' cottages were, and some of the ranches and various buildings. 600 people lived in Frank, and this slide took away around about 100 lives.
We'll never know exactly how many people were killed and still lie buried out there. But we're going to take a look at what happened on that fateful night and reveal some of the stories and accounts from those who were there.
So the town of Frank, it was only founded in 1900, so when the tragedy struck, it was only 3 years old, basically. And it's interesting because Frank was founded by a man called Henry Frank, whose partner was Sam Gebbo, and they'd found that there was a coal seam for a drift mine where you go straight into the side of the mountain here, Turtle Mountain. Problem with Turtle Mountain is this: massive limestone overhang. The locals here, the First Nations here, they call it the mountain that moves. There's a big clue there, isn't it? Apparently they wouldn't even look at the mountain. They stayed away from it. But there was this rich, very, very rich coal seam. So Frank and his partner Sam, they founded the Canadian American Coal and Coke Company. There will be a railway spur linking into the Canadian Pacific Railway. There will be a road. There will be a town. And it's amazing what they did, because when they actually figured out where they were going to put the town, they actually had lots put out. They had all of the things that you would need for a town. They're going to build a school. They're going to have a church. They're going to have all of those different things. So they have an open day. And they say, all you've got to do is pay your railway ticket. The rest of it is free. Apparently there was 900 people sat down for a free lunch on this day, and the last train left at midnight. People were impressed.
As I said, there's a problem with Turtle Mountain. It's unstable. It's got a major thrust fault running through it, which divides and weakens the layers of rock within. Large surface cracks along the summit allowed water to enter through the rocks, which ate away at the limestone. Add to this the freezing and thawing action of water and ice. The cracks widened and created even more instability. Originally, though, it was thought that it was the mining that caused the slide, but it wasn't. The mountain was just unstable. So what we're going to do now is head down the trail onto the debris field and take a look at that 82 million tons of rock and rubble that destroyed the edge of the town of Frank.
So when the top of that mountain, Turtle Mountain, broke loose, the crack was heard over 120 miles away, and the speed 70 miles per hour. But the whole slide only lasted about 100 seconds.
And it said there was around 44 million cubic meters of rock that fell. The whole slide covers 3 square kilometers. And you know, in places the rock is believed to be 45 meters deep. Can you imagine that? 45 meters is the size of a 15-story tower block. That's just incredible.
You know, somebody was talking yesterday when I was listening about why don't they dig up the dead? Well, to be quite honest, it's impossible. But just to put this into perspective, if you built a wall 1 meter wide, 6 meters high, from Victoria in British Columbia, using this rubble, you could make it all the way to Halifax in Nova Scotia. You could basically, using all of this stone, build a wall 6 meters high, 1 meter wide,
clear across Canada.
You know, it's incredible when you get down here amongst the rubble in this field of debris. The size of the rocks, look at the one behind me. It's the size of a house. The one I'm standing on is enormous, and you can see down through the cracks and the fissures how far down this goes. But don't forget, that house-sized piece of rock used to be up there on the top of the mountain. There's some things I'd like to point out. If you look at the bottom there, you can just see the river. And I asked the question yesterday when we visited the site, how come the river's all, still there? It isn't buried underneath the slide. Now, apparently, just a little bit further up, there was a lip. And what happened as the slide came down, it actually leapt across the river. And it formed fingers as well as it went further on. It didn't just finish with a complete edge. There were fingers of rocks and rubbles going in all directions, claiming lives as it went. And this is a good spot where you can just see, just to the right-hand side of the fall, you can see where the trees go up. That's
roughly where the mine was and where the old road that led up to it used to be.
So just before 4 o'clock on that fateful morning, the town of Frank is basically fast asleep. The last drunks maybe are being kicked out of the hotels so they can get on and clean up, ready for the day. But working in the mine behind me are 20 men. It's the night shift. 3 of them are outside, going to have their lunch break, when those inside hear the most incredible crack like thunder, followed quickly by a rush of air. They think there has been an explosion, a mine collapse. They race to the entrance. It has been completely covered over. Now, 17 miners are trapped. Trapped underground is the foreman, Joe Chapman. And then you have Evan Jones, a friend of his. These are men from South Wales. I understand there was even a miner from Patagonia. That's down in Argentina. And it was a Welsh settlement. These Welshmen came over in their droves, coal miners from the valleys of South Wales, and now they are trapped inside the mine. Now, we do know from an eyewitness account that 3 of them who were outside having their lunch began to run when they heard the rubble, and an eyewitness, a member of a train crew there, saw them being swept away. One of them was Alfred Clark, and I'll mention him and his family a little later. Now, the engineer on the train realised that he got to get going, so he full steamed ahead, shouting at his men to grab hold, and 2 of his crew grabbed hold of the rail, and he sped the train out of the way of the slide, which then, of course, buries the mine entrance. So the miners inside, they hear this shock like thunder. Is it an explosion? Is it a roof collapse? Now, I've been deep underground in a mine, in a coal mine, and I'll tell you, big sounds like that, thuds, they frighten you to death. Gas, flood. But these guys now, they realise that the entrance is blocked. Some of them run other ways to see if there's a way out through an air shaft. Everything is blocked. But on top of that, water now is flooding into the mine. There is also the danger, because air is sealed off, of the build-up of methane. They have got to move fast. So they go to where the entrance has been collapsed and they try to dig their way out. It's impossible. The miners are well and truly trapped. So Joe Chapman, the Welsh miner there, they are now well and truly with his crew sealed off from the rest of the world. They soon find out it's impossible trying to dig their way out through the entrance. They do know the water is rising. They have an injured man, William Warrington, who was injured by falling debris. This is really sad for William, because later on he discovers that his wife and children were all killed. Now, we think it's Evan Jones who come up with the idea. Hey, we're in a coal mine. There's a seam of coal that goes out. If we can dig up through that seam, we should be able to get ourselves out. So these miners now, only 2 at a time can get into the seam to dig out. 13 hours they're going to be trapped, but they managed to dig all the way through 6 meters of coal, and I believe it was 2, maybe 3 meters of limestone rocks, and they emerge out the top. As they emerge, they were in danger of falling rocks, so they had to re-dig another entrance, so they were coming out from an overhang. But they could then see the rescue workers had already come up to the mine and they were trying to dig them out. It's quite amazing, because that train that escaped, one of the crew realised that the express is coming the other way and it doesn't know that the mountain has fallen across the railway. So 2 of them set off, but one of them has to give up. I think he hurts his ankle. But the other lad, Sid Choquette, carries on, and he keeps on
a direct course. He doesn't lose his way across this mound of rubble. 2 kilometres of jagged pathway. He finds his way to where the train's going to come, and just in time he manages to wave it down with his lantern and the train stops, saving lives. For this, he was rewarded by the Canadian Pacific Railway. He was given a citation and a cheque for $20, which in those days was no mean sum. Because the slide hit the southeast corner of Frank, it missed the centre of town, but it ploughed through a row of 7 houses, temporary dwellings, tents, that kind of thing. But east of the town, it buried outlying houses, shoe shop, livery stables, 2 ranches and a construction site, as well as, of course, the mine entrance and 2 kilometres of the Canadian Pacific Railway. You know, we have some eyewitness accounts of what happened on that terrible morning. Jim Warrington, one of the members of the Frank community, woke up outside his house, in fact 12 metres away from his house. He had a broken thigh and he'd also been pierced by debris. His bed was another 6 metres on. But then we have the story of Lester Johnson, who woke up under the floor of his house and he crept through a small hole. Well, when he gets out, he'd been pierced through the stomach by a piece of wood. His mum and dad were actually inside the wreckage of the house. They had both unfortunately been killed. But amazingly, when this young lad had that debris removed from his abdomen, they found feathers inside the wound from his quilt. So that piece of wood had been straight through the quilt, taking the debris into that young lad's body. He survived. Just an interesting point there, that there was a hospital in Frank. So all of those who survived, even though they were injured, nobody died from their injuries. One amazing good luck story, I suppose you'd call it, was the story of John Thornley, the shoe repairer. He had a shoe shop right in the path of the slide, but he had a visitor, Ellen, his sister from Pincher Creek, and he'd said, hey, why don't we go into town and I will show you a frontier hotel. We'll have a bit of fun. Because Frank was like a Wild West town, if you like, when you look at it, with the false fronted buildings. So off they went into town and they had a lovely meal and a nice night out. And it was getting dark. And John says to his sister, wait, why not spend the night at the hotel? Then in the morning, you've only just got to hop on the train back to Pincher Creek. You'll be fine. And she said it's a bit extravagant, but they did. And they stayed. His shop was simply blown to pieces, totally covered. And many, many years later, I think it was in the 1940s, a pair of new shoes, which are on display in the visitor centre there, were found, and they're believed to have been from John's shop. What an amazing story. There's another amazing story. This involves an entire family, the Ennis family. You got Sam and Lucy, his wife, together with 3 children, were actually found in their collapsed house. Lucy got a broken collarbone, and they get everybody out. Missing is 15-month-old Gladys, and she's found on a pile of mud. Lucy picks up the baby and thinks she's dead. Her mouth is full of mud. She doesn't appear to be breathing. So what Lucy does is wraps her up in a shawl. Must have been broken-hearted, and of course she's in agony herself. But then she walks over to the rescuers. When they unwrap the baby, the mud must have been spat out, and the baby is found to be alive. It's incredible when you look at some of these stories, how hit and miss this whole disaster actually was, how those fingers of the rubble would hit some but miss the others. There's one story which, it's just so sad, and yet kind of wow, because Lillian Clark, she was 15, never been away from home before. He's working at the boarding house in Frank when disaster struck. She'd been persuaded, because she was working so late in that particular night, don't walk home, just stay overnight, go home in the morning. Never been away, so she reluctantly says, all right then, I'll stay. And the rock slide just misses the boarding house that she was staying in. But her father, Alfred, he was up on the tipple. He was one of those men next to the mine where they sorted the coal from the waste rock, been swept away. and unfortunately the rock slide had actually gone straight over her house, killing her mother and her 5 siblings. And then there's an extra piece. In 1922, the road that had been driven across the rockfall there, they were widening it, and they found a house. They actually broke into one of the ruined houses, and there they found what is believed to be the skeletal remains of Mrs. Clark and her children. What a sad ending to this whole affair. Another sad account, terrible really, is that of the Leach family. Jessie Leach, aged 15, shared a bed with her sister May, who was age 11, and awoke in the debris of their house, and they were rescued, and their baby sister, Marion, 27 months of age, was found nearby, but unfortunately her 4 brothers and her mom and dad, Alexander and Rosemary Leach, were found dead in the ruins. You can see the Leach house here in the image. Theirs is believed to be the house just behind the man standing on the left. You know, the Leach family were Scottish. They'd come to Canada from Scotland for a better life. You know, ironically, within weeks, the mine was reopened and would close just in 1918. It was beset with all kinds of problems. There were strikes, there were pitfalls. I think there was an explosion as well, all in pursuit of king coal. But once the mine had closed, the area will decline. That was the main industry. But what I find quite amazing and a little bit scary, the mountain that moves, Turtle Mountain, it's still on the move. And that begs the question, is this story over yet? Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? The link is in the description. But before I go, quick shout out for some of our Patreon members. As ever, I've got it written down. Big shout out to Michael and Amy James, Daniel Thomas and Stefan Storm. Hey guys, thanks a million. Bye for now.